Hare Krishna, everyone. So today we will cover Canto 3, Chapter 3, the Lord's pastimes out of Vrindavan. So last chapter, in the Chapter 2, we heard about Uddhava's remembrance of Krishna. You know, a devotee is constantly in touch with Krishna through his remembrance, but even more so when he has darshan of Krishna. Then his remembrance is very, very deep. So when a devotee sees Krishna face to face, then his remembrance is even stronger. So Uddhava had seen Krishna in Dwarka. He was very close to Krishna, and he was thinking so intensely that Krishna is with him. So in this chapter, Uddhava is remembering Krishna. And he's not only remembering Krishna, but he's remembering his pastimes in Vrindavan. He's remembering so many wonderful pastimes in Vrindavan, which culminates in the dancing of the gopis with him. And of course, that's a display of his internal energy with his different potencies, which has nothing to do with mundane pastimes. So after describing his pastimes with the cows and Govardhan Hill, Krishna is playing his flute, how he would wander through the forest by the Yamuna, charming the cowherd boys and all the residents of Vrindavan. All the flowers and creepers and Yamuna river would become stunned when they saw Krishna. The Yamuna river would become hard and then would melt after hearing Krishna's flute. Cows would not be able to drink milk from their mothers, and the birds would stop flying. Such a charming description, the wonderful sound of Krishna's flute. So Uddhava was remembering all this in Vrindavan, his lifting of the hill with his left finger to protect his devotees because Indra was pouring so much rain. He was so angry with Indra, and Indra was so furious because no sacrifices were being offered to him. So Uddhava is remembering all this. And then in this chapter, he gives some of these pastimes in short verses. So I will cover only a few of these pastimes. So this is text 1. Shri Uddhava uvacha tata sa agatya puram swa pitros chitrashaya sham baladeva samyuta nipatya dungadripu yutha natham hatam vyakarashad vyasum ujjasorvayam. Sri Uddhava said, thereafter, Lord Krishna went to Mathura city with Sri Baladev, and to please their parents, they dragged Kansa, the leader of the public enemies, down from his throne and killed him, pulling him along the ground with great strength. So as you know, Kansa had given so much trouble to Devaki and Vasudev, his parents. And so, and they had jailed them. He had killed all of their other children. So here, Uddhava is saying that Krishna, after he killed, the Krishna and Balaram at the age of 16, when he killed Kansa, he dragged the dead body of Kansa to his parents, so that they were assured that finally this big atrocious demon was killed, to assure them that actually they had killed him. Now, the reason is because Devaki and Vasudev, they didn't think that their young children, so fragile, so delicate, would be able to kill such a powerful personality. And this was, of course, due to their parental affection. And they were very fearful when they heard that Kansa had come to Mathura on the invitation of, Krishna had come to Mathura on the invitation of Kansa. And in order to convince them, he dragged his body in front of them to encourage them. So we will do our first slide. To teach by example, the Lord went to learn from a qualified teacher in Gurukula. This is text 2, translation. The Lord learned all the Vedas with their different branches simply by hearing them once from his teacher, Sandipani Muni, whom he rewarded by bringing back his dead sons from the region of Yamaloka. This is a fascinating story about when Krishna went to Ujjain, to Gurukula. In about 2 months, he had learned all the subjects, memorized it completely. And then when it was a time to leave, he did something very appropriate. He asked his teacher, Sandipani Muni, what can I offer in return? So to teach by example that everyone must go to the teacher to learn, he himself went to Gurukula. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that only the Supreme Lord can be well versed in all the branches of the Vedic wisdom simply by hearing it once. Who can do that? Or it can be only the Supreme Lord who can bring the dead body back to life after the soul has already gone to the region of Yamaraj. But Krishna went to the planet of Yamaloka, found his, their dead son of his teacher, and brought him back to his father. And the other point that he was teaching in this pastime is that everyone must learn from a teacher who's bona fide. And then once he's learned from him, he should satisfy the teacher by service and reward. And so he showed that by example. So the Lord is very, very grateful. He's not ungrateful. He's very, very, Prabhupada writes in the purport, how the Lord is therefore he's therefore an ingrate to anyone who renders him some sort of service. The devotees of the Lord who always engage in his loving service are never to be disappointed in the progressive march of devotional service. And Sandipani Muni, he asked Krishna something which was impossible because he knew that he was the Supreme Lord. So he's asking something which would be impossible for anybody to do other than Krishna. So our next slide. The Lord forcefully took the Parijata tree from Indra to please his wife. Translation, text 5. Just to please his dear wife, the Lord brought back the Parijata tree from heaven, just as an ordinary husband would do. But Indra, the king of heaven, induced by his wives, henpecked as he was, ran after the Lord with full force to fight him. So this is a wonderful story of how the Lord once went to the heavenly planets to fulfill the desire of Satyabhama, who wanted a Parijata tree, which only grew in the heavenly planets. And so he took Satyabhama to please her, and the Lord brought back the tree. And this made Indra so angry that he chased him. And why did he chase him? Because his wives inspired him to run after Indra, to run after the Lord, to fight. They were very attached to that tree. And like a henpecked husband, it is said, whose Prabhupada is calling as a fool, listened to them, and dared to fight with Krishna. He was a fool because he was fighting with who? He was not fighting with somebody ordinary, right? And he forgot, Prabhupada said, he was a fool on this occasion because he forgot that everything belongs to the Lord. And then Prabhupada clarifies some nice point that the Lord was not at fault, even though he went and stole something which belonged to somebody else, but he was not at fault. Why? Because Lord, being the Supreme, he's owner of everything. We are simply taking it from him, borrowing it from him. But actually, he is the true owner of all property. Therefore, actually, everything belongs to him. And because Indra was dominated by his beautiful wives, he became a fool. So Krishna was not henpecked in a foolish way, but Indra was. Because Krishna, Prabhupada goes on to explain how Krishna is the most detached. He can have millions of Satyabhamas within a moment if he so desires. So he's one of his opulences is that he is fully renounced. And this seems very contradictory when we hear things like this, when he takes Satyabhama to fulfill her desires. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. He's always satisfying. He's controlled by his devotees, by their love. And his only business is to satisfy them and to give them all the credit. And this is Krishna's Bhakta Vasalya mood. He gives himself, just like he became a chariot driver of Arjuna. He recovered the son of his teacher. And now he's getting the Parijata tree for Satyabhama. So all these three things are his Bhakta Vasal mood. So this will take us to our next slide. Krishna killed his own son Narakasura, married 16,000 girls kidnapped by this demon. Verses 6 to 9, translation. Narakasur, the son of Dharitri, the earth, tried to grasp the whole sky, and for this he was killed by the Lord in a fight. His mother then prayed to the Lord. This led to the return of the kingdom to the son of Narakasura, and thus the Lord entered the house of the demon. And Prabhupada writes in the purport that Narakasur, he became a demon due to bad association of Banasur, another demon. So an atheist who doesn't believe in God, according to Prabhupada, is called a demon. And how Prabhupada warns here that how a person born of good parents also can turn into a demon by bad association. So what does this show? That birth is not always a criterion for goodness. Unless and until one is trained in the culture of good association, one cannot become good. In other words, training is more important than only birth. Birth, coming from a Vaishnava family, always helps and aids in that process, but it's not the guarantee. And we see that today. Text 7. There in the house of the demon, all the princesses kidnapped by Narakasur at once became alert upon seeing the Lord, the friend of the distressed. They looked upon him with eagerness, joy, and shyness, and offered to be his wives. Prabhupada goes on to explain the story of how Narakasur kidnapped. These were daughters of kings that he conquered. And he kept all of them. He would kidnap these young, beautiful girls and keep them imprisoned in his palace. And so when Krishna killed Narakasur and Krishna entered the palace, the princesses were very inspired and enlivened to see Krishna and his beauty. And of course, they've been kidnapped and they were suffering and they were under great distress. So when Krishna accepted them, they wanted to be his wives. In the Vedic custom, if the girls leave the father's home, nobody would marry them. So this was very appropriate that Krishna married all of them who would be rejected by society. Text 8. All those princesses were lodged in different apartments, and the Lord simultaneously assumed different bodily expansions, exactly matching each and every princess. He accepted their hands in perfect rituals by his internal potency. Very interesting verse. A little detail that we may not have known. Okay, we know that Krishna expanded himself, like himself, and became husband of each of those 16,000 queens. And for each of them, he provided a separate marble palace with everything, with all the amenities. But here is saying that he assumed expansions exactly matching each and every princess. How detailed Krishna is and how perfect he is. So in other words, if the queen's physical stature was taller Then Krishna accordingly became a suitable partner, a perfect match, where he maybe became taller, or just, or in other ways, physically. It doesn't expand on this, but this is what is meant, right? And Krishna's, this is what's happened also when Brahma stole all the cows and all the calves and the friends, and when Brahma got really bewildered, and then Krishna took pity on him, and he showed how he himself had expanded, and then he showed his Vishnu forms, right? So when Krishna expanded, even as cowherd boys who were stolen by Brahma, even then he was exactly matching the boy that their mothers had known. In other words, if there was a mole on their cheek, then Krishna had a mole there, so that when he went home, his parents could know that it's their child, and felt affection, knowing that these markings were there, So Krishna does everything perfectly. So Prabhupada here is writing in the purport. By his internal potency, the Lord can expand himself into various personalities of Swayam Prakash, and again into Prabhav and Vaibhav forms. And all of them are non-different from one another. The forms into which the Lord expanded to marry the princesses in different apartments were all slightly different, just to match each and every one of them. They are called Vaibhav Vilasa forms, and are affected by the internal potency Yoga Maya. How wonderful the Lord is. Next slide, we'll move on. The Lord did not kill Kalyavan and Jarasandha himself in order to give credit to his devotees. So in other words, after Krishna killed Kansa, immediately Kansa's friends, Kalyavan, especially Kalyavan, and Jarasandha, they attacked Mathura on all sides. And Krishna could have easily taken care of them. And they had really huge armies. They had surrounded Mathura from all sides. It was impossible to get out. And so Krishna, of course, being the Supreme Lord, could have killed all of them. But he wanted to give credit to his devotees. And therefore, he did not kill them himself. Text 10. Kalivan, the king of Magad, and Shalva attacked the city of Mathura. But when the city was encircled by their soldiers, the Lord refrained from killing them personally, just to show the power of his own men. We know the story of how Krishna, how did he avoid killing them? He ran, he fled from the city, and he therefore is known as a Ranchor, like a coward. That's what the demons thought. So Ranchor means one who fled from fighting. And actually, the fact is that Krishna wanted to kill through his own devotees, called Muchukund and Bhima. Muchukunda killed Kalivan, and Bhima killed Jarasandha. And they acted as agents of the Lord. And by doing this, Prabhupada explains, Krishna wants to exhibit the prowess of his devotees as if he were personally unable to fight. But his devotees were able to kill them. Prabhupada writes, the relationship of the Lord with his devotees is a very happy one. Actually, the Lord descended at the request of Brahma in order to kill all the undesirables of the world. But to divide the share of glory, he sometimes engaged his devotees to take the credit. And I've already mentioned how he became the charioteer of Arjuna in the battle of Kurukshetra. So Krishna, since he had to kill so many of them at one time, right? He already killed Kansa, but he still had to kill Jarasandha, Kalivan, and Shalva. And so instead of expanding himself, dividing himself, he empowered his devotees to fight, different devotees to fight such formidable enemies, to glorify them and give them all credit. And one interesting point that comes from this is that this Krishna did to show the prowess of his devotees, how powerful they are, that sometimes they're even more powerful than himself. However, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the prowess in the powerful, and he is the ability in man. So actually, he is the one who is the powerful one. He is the one who's doing this. Who's killing, even though he wants to just give credit to his devotees. So in the same way, in the Battle of Kurukshetra, he was the one who was giving that power to Arjuna to kill. Because we hear in the Bhagavad Gita how Arjuna was very tiny compared to the Maharathis. So many Maharathis in the Kauravas army. And then another example we can think of is Srila Prabhupada. How Lord Chaitanya predicted that the holy name of the Lord will be chanted in every town and village. But this was effected through the agency of Prabhupada. Because Krishna wanted Prabhupada to get all the glory of spreading this message all over the world. Because he was such a dear devotee of Krishna and totally empowered by Krishna to do this. So his devotees, he's giving credit to the devotees, but the devotees don't want that credit. They give credit to the Lord. So this is Krishna's mercy towards his devotees. This will take us to our next slide. The earth can accommodate overpopulation, faithful to him, not those who are envious. So this is a very interesting point. Let me read the translation. Interesting point that Prabhupada raises here. After the end of the battle of Kurukshetra, the Lord said, the abatement of the earth's great burden, 18 Akshihonis, has now been effected with the help of Drona, Bhishma, Arjuna, and Bhima. But what is this? There is still the great strength of the Yadu dynasty, born of myself, which may be a more unbearable burden. So first of all, Prabhupada raises that point that in modern times, people think that overpopulation is the world's problem. Due to that, there's wars and other, lack of food because there's too many people. But actually, the earth is never overburdened. Prabhupada writes how the heaviest mountains and the greatest ocean, they hold more living entities than there are human beings. And they're never overburdened. Actually, statistically, if we see that humans are not even 5% of the total number of living beings. Prabhupada is explaining here. If the birth rate of human beings is increasing, then the birth rate of other living beings is also increasing proportionately. The birth rate of lower animals, beasts, aquatics, birds, is far greater than that of human beings. There's an adequate arrangement for food for all the living beings all over the earth by the orders of the Supreme Lord. And he can arrange more and more if there's actually a disproportionate increase of living beings. So therefore, there's no question of an increase in population causing a burden. The earth became overburdened due to dharma glani, or irregular discharge of the Lord's desire. And the Lord appears on the earth to curb the increase of miscreants and not the increase in population, as is wrongly put forward by the mundane economist. So when Krishna came here, there was plenty of these miscreants. When Brahma went to the shore of the ocean, milk ocean, to request Krishna to come because Mother Earth was very distressed, then the Lord, he, in order to fulfill the desire of his devotees, he came. So he did not come to get rid of overpopulation, right? And his purpose of coming is to make sure that the conditioned souls who are living in this material world, they get a chance to go to the kingdom of God. And so to facilitate that, Krishna comes in so many incarnations to attract their hearts. So this is the reason why Krishna creates this material world. So this will take us to our next slide. The Yadu's burden of love for the Lord, text 14. Now, Prabhupada goes on to explain in verse 14 that there are two kinds of burden. There is the burden of the beast and the burden of love. This is a very interesting point that's coming from the same text. How both of them, there are two types of burden, the burden of the beast and the burden of love. Now, what is the burden of the beast? I'm sure we can guess, right? Burden of the beast would be burden that we don't want to carry, right? And it will be the burden on earth of demons like Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, who had become such a great burden to Mother Earth, right? Why? Because they were doing all those things which were destroying the world and the people and the devotees. For example, Hiranyakashipu, when he came, specifically, he was after the devotees of the Lord. He was destroying the hermitages of the saintly sages. He was destroying trees that bore fruit. He was destroying the earth by using, but by killing cows. He was not allowing this natural cooperation between the cows and Mother Earth. When cows graze on the land, it gives cow manure, right? It passes cow manure. And that becomes such a wonderful fertilizer for Mother Earth. And so products produced that's born from this type of cooperation between Mother Earth and the cows is permanent. The benefits that one gets from these products becomes very lasting and very beneficial, and it nourishes the brain tissues, which helps in the spiritual advancement of people. But what Hiranyakashipu did is by killing the cows and using artificial fertilizers, he did get a lot of food, a lot of produce. It is said that how his kingdom was so full of opulence in every way, right? Even in different vegetables and fruits and things like that, right? But that kind of opulence which is born out of exploitation is never lasting. It actually is very short-lived. And therefore, the wealth that we see among nations is a wealth that is very temporary. Why? Because it's born out of exploitation. It's not born out of harmony with the environment, harmony with Mother Earth. And this is the burden that Mother Earth feels. The population of demoniac persons on her body. And then she holds back eventually. So temporarily it may seem that she is giving, but actually she's being exploited, right? And so eventually it goes away. So it's mentioned about the Yadus, because Prabhupada is making the point here that Yadus were not a burden for the Lord. They were actually a burden of love, because they were Krishna's own family members. And actually, they numbered millions. Krishna married 16,000 wives, women, right? So, with each of them, he had 10 children. So you can calculate there were so many of them. So they calculated to millions. So was that a burden on Mother Earth? The population that came from Krishna's family of the Yadus? No. They were very dear to Krishna, and therefore they were very dear to Mother Earth. Mother Earth actually is a devotee of Krishna. It is said in the 10th canto, she's actually one of the wives of Krishna, because Narkasur was a son of Mother Earth and Krishna's own son. Right? So she naturally becomes very joyful when the devotees rule the world, like Maharaj Yudhishthir, Maharaj Parikshit. They had so much prosperity in the kingdom because Mother Earth just simply gives and gives and gives out of love. So the Yadus were very dear to Krishna. So actually, when it's mentioned in the 11th canto that they were a burden, it means they were a burden of love, Prabhupada explains, in separation. Burden of love in separation from Krishna. And many other reasons why they killed each other also is given. That because they were Krishna's own family members, they would not have survived without Krishna. And they would have trampled the earth. And that would have, out of frustration and anger. So Krishna wanted them to leave before he himself left. So this is an important point here, that Prabhupada goes quite deeply into that in the part of how, Mother Earth, what is a burden and what is not a burden for her. The burden of love and the burden of the beast. So now, so Prabhupada explains some very, very nice points here also, how a devotee is actually an instrument in the hands of Krishna, right? So now when we think of instrument, what comes to our mind is maybe musical instruments, right? For example, the saxophone or the kartals or the mridanga or the harmonium. So when we use these instruments and we create music, so who is creating the music? Is it the instruments or we, the person playing that instrument? Obviously, it's we who's playing the instrument. So the Krishna would use his devotees as instruments, right? But in fact, Krishna is the cause of everything. And he's using them. And the devotee is so happy to be used as an instrument in the hands of the Lord. So the devotee, so when Krishna uses as instruments, it is to fulfill their own desire, the devotee's desire, to be used as instruments in the hands of the Lord. So when they use the individuality, it is to fulfill Krishna's desire. Otherwise, they're not interested in asserting their individuality. Right? So really, Krishna is the cause of all causes, but it's the devotee who is cooperating with the Lord, with the Lord's desire. And it is the devotee's desire that is making it happen. So it's a very, very intricate relationship that the Lord has with his devotees. So this will take us to our last slide. The Lord's pastimes in Dwarka with yadus and queens were intimate and pleasing. So Prabhupada spends many verses about these about this particular topic, all the way from 10 to 22, practically. Right? So what is, let me read the translation first. Simultaneously, the personality of Godhead enjoyed life in the city of Dwarka, strictly in conformity with the Vedic customs of society. He was situated in detachment and knowledge as enunciated by the Sankhya system of philosophy. Now, two contradictory things are going to be covered here. Is that Krishna did everything as a householder, strictly according to Vedic customs of society, which encourages proper grahastha life, according to Vedic rules. In other words, the man takes care of his family, the woman does her own duties, all these things, and they remain like a very cohesive unit. However, Vedic culture also encourages detachment at the proper time. In other words, one cannot stay in grahastha. One has to eventually leave grahastha life, become at least mentally detached, right? At least mentally detached. In other words, one foot is in the grahastha life, but the other foot should always know that detachment should come, must come. So, and Prabhupada is saying how this was very, very well shown in Krishna's Leela in Dwarka with the queens. Now, one would superficially, if you read, it seems like, oh, Krishna was so wonderful to the queens and how he was always attached to them. And we miss that point of how Krishna was situated in detachment and knowledge. And that's part of the Sankhya philosophy. So Krishna was so perfect in everything that he did. And they become a guide for all of us to follow in his example. And by following in his example, we can actually become happy even in material life. Prabhupada writes, without such knowledge, detachment, and custom, the so-called human civilization is no more than an animal society of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. The Lord was acting freely as he willed, yet by his practical example, he taught not to lead a life which goes against the principles of detachment and knowledge. Knowledge means to know that the mission of human form of life is to end all the miseries of material existence, and that in spite of having to fulfill the bodily necessities in a regulated way, one must be detached from such animal life. Fulfilling the demands of the body is animal life, and fulfilling the mission of the spirit soul is the human mission. Text 20. He was there in his transcendental body, the residence of the goddess of fortune. With his usual gentle and sweetly smiling face, his nectarian words, and his flawless character. So his body, Krishna's transcendental body, is the residence of the goddess of fortune. And what does goddess of fortune signify? Wealth, opulence, all beauty, all these things. But yet Krishna is known as the most renounced. How do these things go together? And Prabhupada writes how these two things are not contradictory. Krishna is detached from the variegatedness of the inferior nature, but he is in eternal blissful enjoyment of the spiritual nature or his internal potency. One who has poor fund of knowledge cannot understand this distinction between external and internal potencies. So Prabhupada explains how the internal potency is called Paraprakrita. And this Para Shakti and her manifestations are described also in the Brahma Samhita. The Lord is eternally joyful and cognizant in the taste derived from such transcendental bliss. Negation of the variegatedness of the inferior energy does not necessitate negation of the positive transcendental bliss of the spiritual world. So in other words, Krishna was detached from the lower modes, the inferior energy, but that does not mean that he was detached, that he cannot be attached to the positive transcendental bliss of the spiritual world. Therefore, the Lord's gentleness, his smile, his character, and everything related to him are all transcendental. Such manifestation of the internal potency are the reality of which the material shadow is only a temporary manifestation from which everyone with proper knowledge must be detached. Text 21, the Lord enjoyed his pastimes both in this world and in other worlds, higher planets, especially in the association of the Yadu dynasty. At leisure hours offered by night, he enjoyed the friendship of conjugal love with women. Prabhupada is explaining that although Krishna is transcendental to all material attachment, he nevertheless exhibited much attachment for his pure devotees on the earth. So now we can be clear. Krishna is attached to his devotees. And that gives a lot of consolation, right? Somebody who's so detached, who has everything, who doesn't need the goddesses of fortune, who doesn't need any of us, yet he's very attached to his pure devotees, as well as to the demigods who engage in his service in the heavenly planets. Prabhupada is saying he displayed special attachment for his family members, the Yadus, as well as for his 16,000 wives, who had the opportunity to meet him in the leisure hours of night. Okay. Text 22, the Lord was thus engaged in household life for many years, but at last his detachment from ephemeral sex life was fully manifested. And so very much Prabhupada is emphasizing again those very points that I've just talked about. Again and again. So you can see how important this point is, because Prabhupada expands on it in 3 or 4 verses again and again, saying it in different ways. Right? So in other words, he's saying that how Krishna was never detached from the service of his transcendental associates like Rukmini and other goddesses of fortune. What to speak of the residents of Vrindavan, right? So I will stop here and I will give it over to Rati Prishta Mataji for explanation of the guidebook. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji, for so wonderful explanations of all the beautiful pastimes, which were really made more beautiful and pleasing to the heart, and in simplified manner the way you explain. So now I will go on to guidebook. I'm just sharing the screen. So this is Lord Pastimes out of Vrindavan, the story summary. As always, the story summary begins with in quite an interactional and conversational manner. Uddhava loved talking about Krishna. After he told Vidura about the Lord's amazing feats in Vrindavan, he narrated Lord Krishna's adventures out of Vrindavan. Krishna and his big brother Balram entered the city of Mathura, began Uddhava. This magnificent city was ruled by Krishna's evil uncle Kamsa, who had tortured Krishna and Balram's parents. Poor Vasudeva and Devaki, said Vidura, shaking his head. It was so unbearable to see. Kansa caused to them so much pain and trouble. And what about all the people he killed and tormented? His acts were atrocious. So this is how actually the story goes on in such a conversational manner that children can realize the story happening in front of their eyes. And it goes on like this. Then there are key messages wherein children can actually, memorize the important verses. They can discuss with each other, apply those verses in their lives. And then we have understanding the story-based questions, wherein teachers or parents can also assess how much children have actually understood the chapter. And then there are higher order thinking questions, which parents and teachers should always, I always do like this. I keep these questions, I read them in advance, and then I mark them in Bhagavatam translations in pencil. And when we are reading with children, we deliberate upon these points. I make them think and discuss and go deeper on these main points of discussion. They really help for children to have focused discussions on certain issues. And then there are activities, beginning with artistic activities. First one is to develop a Parijata tree of their own. So they need just a cardboard, scissors, some crayons, and they can, really come up with their creative ideas to make a tree. And then origami papers, flowers can be used to decorate the tree. So this is how they can, they can come up with their own creative ideas of how to make a Parijata tree. And then is this wonderful activity of designing an invitation card. So King Nagnajit wanted to give the hand of his daughter Satya to a prince who could defeat 7 strong bulls. Among many princes, only Lord Krishna could defeat the 7 bulls and claim the hand of Satya. So they have to design an invitation card. Again, a very creative idea. Children can imagine how how creatively they can make the card, and how what could be the write-up of the card. So she writes, "I request you to honor the occasion of 7 bulls challenge," she calls it, for the marriage of ceremony of Satya, daughter of King Nagnajit, on Saturday, 14th of August at Royal Palace. So this is how she has even drawn some bulls and fighting and then exchanging garlands. Palki also has been drawn. So like this, children can use their own creative ideas. Actually, this is such interesting. There are so many activities which are so interesting here that children, after reading the translation, sometimes children tend to forget also. But so many activities reinforced in various ways help children to remember all the story and main ideas and main lessons, main teachings. They come to their lives by these activities. And then there are many introspective activities also, like one shared here is the culture of good association, wherein there are some questions, probing questions, which are given, and children can be encouraged to think about them and express their thoughts on them. Like, for example, what is your understanding of good and bad association? Can you give some examples? And then they can also think about in their own lives, how had bad association affected them. Just speaking about all these things actually helped them so much that I found later, after we finished the discussion, both of them were themselves discussing on their own about what is good association, what is bad association, how can they gain more of good association. So, just giving them these chances to think about all these things actually help them to apply these teachings in their lives so much. And then there are critical thinking activities, like, for example, this one, the qualities of the Lord. So here, there are some qualities that are given in circles, and children have to think of the pastimes which they have read in this story, and then they have to, match these qualities with some pastimes which Krishna has conducted in out of Vrindavan. So, like, for example, caring, he writes that to please their parents, they dragged Kamsa out of from his throne. Similarly, being grateful was indicated in the story when Krishna brought back the dead sons of his guru from Yamaloka. So all these all these qualities have to be children have to think of appropriate pastimes which Krishna has done with reference to these qualities. And then, very interestingly, children are also told then to think about similar, same qualities, but they have to think of some Vrindavan pastimes which have happened, which can highlight these qualities of Krishna. So children were actually, they were able to think of so many other pastimes also, but I told them to think of main, which emphasize these qualities the most. So then, dutiful, she wrote that Krishna used to carry the slippers of Nanda Maharaj on his head. Compassionate, he gave Putna a position of mother. Then independent in Brahma Vimohan Leela. So all these pastimes have also been, happened in Vrindavan also. So then, what can we understand about the nature of Lord Krishna from this? So like this, children can be encouraged to think about the pastimes of the Lord in very interesting manner. And then this is a story wherein this is an activity wherein children, there are certain characters which are given, and children have to fit in all these characters have to be fit in these four categories of Krishna interacts with his devotees as a protector, as a wish fulfiller, as a prosecutor, or as a spiritual teacher. So they have to take these characters and write some narration or a small line of pastimes that have taken place with all these characters, wherein Krishna has majorly acted as a protector, as a wish fulfiller, as a prosecutor, or as a spiritual teacher. And then there is this fill in the blanks, again, linguistic development, remembering the characters. Children have to read the sentences and match the appropriate characters have to come in with the sentences. And then there are the answers to all the understanding story-based questions, the qualities of Lord, and the other activities. So this is how it provides detailed answers also, so that teachers can know whether we are working in right direction or not. So that was all about guidebook. Now we can have question answer sessions. So participants can please raise their hands for questions so that Mataji can throw some light on it.
Thank you, Rati. Very nice. Very meaningful activities. It did bring out a lot of key points here in terms of, character, understanding Krishna's qualities. Very nice. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, Archana Mataji has a question. Mataji, you can unmute yourself.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Archana. Yes.
So I have a question. So the way you, Prabhupada explains the burden of love and the burden of beast, and how you also explained the lifestyle of Hiranyakashipu's times, and so in practically in everyday time, I mean, these days it is more of how you explain Hiranyakashipu's life to be like. We use artificial fertilizers wherever we are in the world, and we are very far from what it is described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So how do we reconcile this fact, and how do we even attempt to please Guru and Mother Earth and Krishna in this practical days?
Yes. The point about using artificial fertilizers and killing cows is happening today. It's not, we are not far away from what Hiranyakashipu did to what's being done today. And you can see it's the same pattern, and Prabhupada mentions in those purports that how there's many Hiranyakashipus now. We just heard about one, but there's many. And the reason is because those very things are happening today, in terms of the environment, the cutting of the trees and, this all those things. If you read that chapter 4 of Canto 7, you get a very nice description of what Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons, what he did, and Prabhupada's Prabhupada's explanation of in depth of what's happening today in modern society. So this is very much true, and we can learn. That's why Shastra is such a practical guide, a living guide. It's not meant to be stories of things that happened in the past. And so it becomes very interesting and just stories. To actually understand these stories, one has to have Prabhupada's purports, and also, and therefore association of pure devotees, to actually understand these stories in the proper light and how it affects us practically. So by learning from Hiranyakashipu's faults and mistakes, we can understand the faults and mistakes that are being committed in today's society. Now, in terms of what we can do we can in our own way, or we can help Mother Earth. In other words, Mother Earth, she's a devotee of Krishna. Okay, she's not really, she's pained in the sense that a devotee is pained when a devotee sees the suffering of others and wants to reach out and help as much as he or she can, right? In that way, Mother Earth is feeling the pain. But Mother Earth is not helpless, just like a devotee is not helpless. They have Krishna with them. So she's sometimes depicted like a helpless person, no, in materially speaking, but no, she's actually a great devotee of Krishna. So the way we can please, and so therefore to please a devotee of the Lord is very important. See, Mother Earth is a devotee of Krishna, and she wants to please the Lord by offering her services in the form of fruits, flowers, grains, and things. So naturally, when some atheistic or demonic person takes it and exploits her for the purpose of promoting atheism, she's pained. Okay, and what we can do is to, in our own way, we can please her. In this way, we are pleasing a devotee of the Lord. In this way, Krishna is, and we can please her by living a kind of sattvic life, right? A devotee is by nature, living in harmony, all the things that we just spoke about, killing of cows, which is creating so much pollution in the world, is the number one cause for pollution, is a slaughtering of cows, actually. So that we don't like to do. We're not meat eaters. And then regarding trees and all those things, we believe in natural living. Okay, and then of course we take the steps that is good for the environment, and which is very natural to the devotee. It should be very natural to the devotee. Okay, so devotees are friends to Mother Earth. They are living in harmony with Krishna's bounty. So we want to see that bounty, and whatever we can do in that way, we should do. Basically, in short, that would be the answer. Is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other question anybody has? Mataji, I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. She's not helpless, but she's suffering like a devotee would suffer when they see the pain of others. Prabhupada was so compassionate. The reason why he came to this world is to give us Krishna consciousness, because he was pained by the suffering of others. One time Prabhupada was in Mayapur and he was up on the terrace and looking down, and there were these trash cans, and an old woman, she was was in the trash can hunting for food, and Prabhupada was shedding tears. He was crying. This is how compassionate Prabhupada was. So he was, and at that time he gave the order that no one within 10 miles of the temple should ever go hungry. And that's how the Food for Life was created. So we see how devotees, the tears, how Prabhupada was shedding tears to see this old woman hunting for food, right, in the trash can. So in that way, the devotee is suffering, but that suffering is not the suffering of a materialist. That suffering is the extreme love that a devotee feels for Krishna and his creation. Okay, thank you very much, all of you, for joining into this wonderful presentation of this chapter by Srila Prabhupada's wonderful pulpit. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.